No, thank you very much, Matthew. I see we are now live and streaming on YouTube. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our Prescott Town Council meeting for Monday, February 1st, 2021. Start right off the bat, of course, with item 1 and call the meeting formally to order and move directly on to 2, approval of the agenda. And just note for everyone, there were 2 staff reports that did go out later this afternoon. So if everyone hopefully has had a chance to take a look at those. The budget report was put out as well as the transit study. So correct on that one, Matthew? Those are the only 2 that came out this afternoon.
That is correct. Thank you.
So just as a notice for everyone, if they haven't checked their email the last couple of hours, those items are in there. So moving right along for approval of the agenda, the recommendation is that the agenda for the council meeting on February 1, 2021 be approved as presented. Can I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Ostrander, seconded by Councilor Burton. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any member of council have a declaration this evening? Seeing none. 4 and 5, presentations and delegations. Nothing tonight. So that moves us right on to 6 minutes of our previous council meeting. And 6.1 is the minutes for our meeting of January 18th, 2021. Recommendation being the council minutes of January 18th, 2021 be accepted as presented. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Young, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. Any discussion on that set of minutes from January 18th? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, everyone. 7, communications and petitions. Nothing formally there this evening. Under 8, under consent reports, we do have 3 items. 8.1 is the information package. 8.2 is staff report on bylaw activity from last year. And 8.3 is staff report on construction activity in 2020 as well. So we just have the one motion encapsulating all 3 of those. So the recommendation reads that all items listed under the consent report section of the agenda be accepted as presented. Anyone have any comment on any 3 of those items? Councilor McConnell.
Gotta be honest with you, Your Honor. Since we've gone to 2 meetings a week, these have become kind of onerous. There's 101 pages in this one. And I would find it very difficult if there isn't something in the, let's see, how many items have we got? 25 different items that somebody doesn't have something they want to put over. So I'm not sure this way we're doing this now is the way we should be doing it. I've got 2 items circled and 1, 2, 3, 4 checked. All are of very interest to me, and I would be really surprised if other members of council aren't equally affected.
We can always break out the information package, Councilor McConnell, but we do have the option to speak to the items though, and still to refer them. Same as we always have. It just allows for a little expediency in terms of the report presentations, I think, overall. And if no one has any comments or questions on information items, it's probably the quicker way to go. But please, if you want to comment on any of the items or seek to refer them on to future discussion, please do so.
Well, I'll hit on number 5, which is the Volunteer Center of St. Lawrence Rideau requesting fire hydrants with personality. It's a fundraising effort, $100 a fire hydrant. I think that's worthwhile discussing in town. It costs us nothing, and it's money raised for a good cause, and it would give a little bit of a lift to some fire hydrants that could probably use a bit of paint every once in a while. Number 9, Township of Augusta resolution regarding the reversal of the Ontario Fire College closure. I think that's something that we should ask our fire chief Barry about his opinion on that, and possibly make a comment on. The number 13, Municipality of Southwest Middlesex resolution of support regarding municipal drainage matters and need for coordination with Canadian National Railways. And as we know, in our area, we have 2 main east-west dams here. One is a 401 and the other one's at the CNR, which has a tendency to bottle water up And given the water situation in the east end of town, if we can get some support from the railway to help pay for draining part of that, I think that's worthwhile looking into. Number 19, Perth County letter of support regarding the resolution to extension of grant application deadlines. I notice we have one coming up here very quickly for the transportation thing, and their point was that in a smaller community with fewer help, it's tough to get some of these grants in on time, and I think that's worth supporting. And number 20, the Municipality of Grey Highlands resolution of support regarding increased municipal insurance rates. That should definitely be of interest to us, and I think we should support that. And the Town of Bracebridge ratified motion regarding infrastructure funding. I think all of those, to me, are worth looking at further, and perhaps other people have other ones there that they've picked out. I don't know. But it just seems to me that with that many things under there, it's an onerous thing to just introduce and say, well, let's pass it and get on. I mean, it is time saving, but I don't think it's the way we should be doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McConnell. So staff taking note of those items. Anything controversial there that we couldn't bring back and have a quick look at for support? And there are a couple items there. They are interesting. The one on the joint and several liability, the last insurance one's an interesting one because it's certainly one that's been with us for quite a number of years and has been something very difficult for any provincial government to actually solve in I would say a manner that really assists municipalities. It doesn't kind of leave us exposed there. But staff does have those listed. I think was it 6, Councillor McConnell, in total?
1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 6, Your Honor. Your Worship.
Thank you. So we can take a note of those, and we can look to address those at our next meeting then in terms of resolutions of support, and we can speak a little more fully to them. Anyone else have anything on the information package or the two bylaw reports on building and overall bylaw for 2020? Seeing none, then I'll return to the motion and call for the vote then. All those in favor? Motion is carried. So moving along to number 9, committee reports. Nothing this evening. 9, mayor's portion of the evening. It's actually been a really busy last couple of weeks. It seems to have been everybody's kind of hit the ground running in 2021. So a couple of comments. We had our first EOMC, the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus meeting of 2021 last Thursday. Congratulate again Diane Therrien, Mayor of Peterborough, for being acclaimed to the chair position. We know she'll do a great job. They asked me to stay on as vice chair, so I'm going to stick around in that position for this year as well. Well, it's a 2-year term actually. And one thing just to note for everyone, we are having a meeting later in February. I'm not sure if we scheduled the exact day yet, but we're going to review some of our EOMC priorities. So if anyone here does have anything that would fit that bill in terms of a regional priority we should be looking at, please let me know. We can really fight above our weight at the EOMC level. So if there's anything that's anyone has to bring forward, please let me know, and I'll try to work it into that conversation. Again, it's an important group, and we can get some good things accomplished there. So I'm looking forward to the new year of that. Joint services, we had our first meeting with Brockville, again, and Aquay and ourselves last Tuesday over Zoom. This was to set priorities for that renegotiation of the joint services agreement between the 3 separated municipalities and the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. Meeting went very well, and we're moving forward with a second meeting on February 9th of the 3 separated municipalities, and then we're going into to have a first meeting with the counties and new warden Roger Haley we're trying to schedule that for before the end of February. A few other items. Met with the Township of Augusta CAOs, myself, and Mayor Malenka on January 22nd to discuss a number of mutual issues. As everyone here knows, we do have the the service delivery review that we did together and looking to implement some things there, and also that ECDev strategic plan that we agreed to do last year. Right about this time, we announced it in March, and then COVID hit. We're at the point where we're getting close to putting that forward in terms of an RFP. So we'll bring everything back for a full update to council very soon, because we do have to act upon that subcommittee we agreed to set up with Augusta with regards to, I think it's Councillor Shankar and myself were the town reps that we nominated, and Matthew, I believe, was it November we did that at council, or in the fall. We need to have the first meeting of that group and start bringing back some action items there back to us. And of course, Augusta has their new CAO in place now. I believe he either started today or is starting next. Matt's nodding, so I think I did have the date right today. Brian Brown, so congratulations to him on the new job, and look forward to working with him and extending the great relationship we've always had with the Township of Augusta. I had my first meeting of the Board of Health on January 21st. Great to be welcomed there by that group, and I'll be sure to bring back any updates as I can from the Board of Health meetings. Also attended our United Counties of Leeds Grenville, that housing affordability task force. So that was January 20th. We're moving forward towards that midterm report that I said I would bring back to council and get all of our feedback on that when we're ready to go. And we're at the point where we're soliciting that input from the councils. And also I should note that I met on over Zoom with Parks Canada on January 19th. I believe I mentioned this a little while ago. Councilor McConnell brought up some potential areas we could look at with Parks Canada. I mentioned that we had this meeting coming up in January. It was with Carmen Hancock, who's the new superintendent of the Georgian Bay East field unit. So basically, she's the regional boss for our area. And Juan Sanchez, who is, of course, the local superintendent at Fort Wellington, was on the call, raised a number of issues there. We've always had such a great partnership with Parks Canada, talked about cross-promotion of the new museum we're setting up downtown, talked about partnering on future events as we have in the past, discussed that heritage pathway lighting that we have been looking at, and we've had in budget discussions here at council, the solar lighting for a little while now. I think we did have it in last year, and we're looking at it again this year, and also talked about any other possibilities with regards to that whole heritage pathway area. And of course, the land that we own down there that's long been designated the hotel land / condo development land. So very good conversation, and we're going to be following that up in the not too distant future. So we'll bring anything we have back to council on that. So really good to meet with Carmen and to reaffirm those great ties we've always had with Parks Canada. I think that's it for me tonight. So I'll pass the baton over to Councillor Burton and move on to item 11, outside boards, committees, and commissions. Leanne, please.
Thank you. I had my first opportunity actually to participate in the Roma conference. So I was happy to do that. Lots of great topics that were discussed, and one in particular that I was really interested is the senior services and for the aging and keeping the seniors at home, and affordable housing for seniors, age appropriate programming for seniors. So it was nice to hear that in April we might be getting an announcement for some funds. So that was pretty exciting, because I think it is important to keep the seniors in their own homes as long as possible, and gives them that independence. And if there's services out there, and I know there is, I'm part of that service right now, and to keep their quality of life in their own home is important. So it was a great conference, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Great to get some feedback on the conference this year. Councillor Jansman, please.
No report from me this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McConnell.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Todd. No live meetings for me, but I'll just point out once again that the library is open from 1 to 5 for door pickups, door delivery, whatever you want to call it. One of the things that I used to find very interesting when we could go into the library, they had a shelf of new books, and then you could take a look at the new books and sign a list that you wanted those early. We can't do that anymore, but they do have a list of the new books on the door. So if you are interested in any of the books on the new door or the new books on the door, you might recognize an author. You can ring the doorbell or call into the library and get your name on the reserve list to get one of those books early. The library also lends out movies. If there's movies you like to see, can't pick it up on Netflix or on television, phone into the library, perhaps they have it and you can check it out overnight or over a couple nights. Walker House, there is so much going on through Walker House that I really can't take the time to tell you all about it. So I just cherry picked a very few things here. They've started a bunch of virtual tours, or they're getting in on a bunch of virtual tours. And if you phone in to Susan at 925-5300, she can fill you in on all of them. But I just picked out a few here that I found interesting. February 2nd, expedition to Africa. February 24th, Michelangelo's Vatican and the Sistine Chapel. March, I forgot to write the date down, a tour of Venice. March 31st, the Louvre and its sculpture masterpieces. So a lot of nice things there that you can go on tour with through Walker House. They have their regular stuff going on. One of those things, again, I just picked out one, an outdoor walking club, which is on Fridays, and they pick various locations to have that in. But a lot going on there to give you some interest if you can't get outside, or if you want something to do on your computer. And actually, they even have iPads that they can lend out. If you don't happen to have an iPad, you can talk to them and they will give you an iPad to loan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Susan Vellum certainly does a fantastic job there. Really glad to hear all those extra details of what's happening. Councillor Ostrander, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Police Services Board meeting on January 21st. The mayor and I attended, and there was a concern expressed that maybe even though it's the dead of winter, that the speeding on King Street is still an issue that required attention. And lo and behold, in the last week or 10 days, I've seen considerable activity with our local folks down on King Street, and several people pulled over. And so that's looking good. Staff Sergeant, Acting Staff Sergeant J.P. Parent is going to be out at the Grenville Detachment here for some time, filling in. And we sort of give him the nod to look into some costing on photo radar. He's a big fan of it. He's experienced it in the outlying Ottawa areas, and it's worked quite well. So our next meeting, he's going to get back to us with some numbers, hopefully, and we'll have a look at that. One other of our organizations in the community, Connect Youth, is looking at, I guess you could say, growing considerably. They had a proposal in about November from the John Howard Society, and it was just the conversation stage at that point that they were, John Howard Society was wondering if they would be interested in joining with them as a joint venture, retain their namesake and everything, but be under one umbrella. And in the interim, over the December-January period here, there's been other conversations, and it looks like they're going ahead with a full-blown consultation process and study on this to see the ins and outs for both organizations, to see if that would be a doable thing. So that's going to take a while to sort that out, and I'll report back on that in due time when there's more to report. So that's it for me.
Thanks very much, Mike. Appreciate the updates. Councillor Shankar, please.
Thank you. No meetings for me in the last 2 weeks. I did notice an increased presence of the OPP in front of the golf course almost on a daily basis. So hopefully the message is getting out there, and it's nice to see our OPP taking a stand on the speeding that's occurring in that area. I think their presence, even if it's for a week, if it lasts longer, that's great. I think their presence will slow down the cars. And I'm also in favor of that photo radar if that does come to light. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Gory. Yeah, it's good. It's good to see the OPP really taking this on now. After we've got a lot of people walking on the streets right now, and that's a key area there where people cross to the heritage pathway. So nice to see that enforcement. And we just want people to slow down. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I can report that St. Lawrence Lodge has adopted their operations budget for this year. Our share at the moment is an increase of a couple $1,000, something under 1.5% increase. It may change a little bit before the final numbers, but they've worked very, very hard. And I think it took us 3 meetings to get down to a number that we thought we could live with. I can report as of last Thursday, the home was COVID-free. By comparison, 41% of Ontario homes are not COVID-free. So 98% of our residents have received their first dose of the vaccine, and 19 staff, there were some vials left over and they can't be used after 6 hours. So they took advantage of that and inoculated 19 of the staff. The second dose has been postponed, as you've heard on the news for the last few weeks. So our second dose for all of those people will be on February 25th. Testing for staff is a weekly procedure. That means the EMS is performing 250 plus tests for us every week of staff coming into the building. One shift is more than 100. So they come in, they get tested, they get isolated. 15 minutes later, when the results come through that they are negative, they go into work. And that goes on at least once a week. You've heard Toronto is sending some cases to Kingston. That means Kingston sends some cases to Brockville, and that means Brockville General Hospital has asked us to take in some of their long-term patients. So our beds are filling up again. We're up to 210 residents in the 224 room facility. I can also report that they have set up a COVID room, segregated it from the rest. And so if somebody has to go into isolation, they've got 9 beds in there for isolation. And good news, our new Wi-Fi system will be up and running hopefully this week, if not this week, next week. So all the residents will be able to enjoy Netflix and all the other pleasures of Skyping or whatever it is they do with their family. So that's a huge improvement, and everyone's looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that update, Ray. Good to hear that on the budget. I know there was, I think, a marathon again last week to get that number down. So good work on that to you and the rest of the board. That's a much more livable number than what the original ones were discussed. So that's good news for us all. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for the reports, and we'll move on now to item 12. We do have a few items under staff this evening. First up is 12.1, that's staff report 12-2021. That's on the 2021, the new federal census. Recommendation reads that the corporation of the town of Prescott supports the 2021 census and encourages all residents to complete their census questionnaire online at www.census.gc.ca. Accurate and complete census data support programs and services that benefit our community. And also the recommendation reads that staff issue a media release and promotes the 2021 census further on the town's social media outlets. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor McConnell, seconded by Councillor Burton. Comments on that quickly? It's just essentially, it's the feds asking for a little support to get the word out more than anything else. So not much really that needs much more discussion, but I'll open it up for comments, questions. Councillor McConnell, please.
A question, Mayor Todd, if I may. Does this have anything to do with the voter list?
Yes.
Well, isn't the voter list drawn from MPAC information?
Mhm.
Matthew, please.
So this has to do with the every 5-year census. And so I don't believe it has anything in relation to the voter list. In terms of the municipal voter list, I believe in 2023, after the next municipal election, it will be transferring from MPAC to provincial authority for doing the voter list. But this in particular has a focus on the 5-year census, and it's critically important because it also drives some of our funding from a federal gas tax perspective and other programs. So.
Yeah, good catch, Councillor McConnell. Weren't we discussing that? Wasn't there a clerks group that was looking at the voter list and recommendations that went forward a little while ago?
Something like that. Yeah, I was just concerned that, not everybody fills out these things and all of a sudden you go to vote. I was going to say 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, and you're not on the voters list, so if it doesn't have direct relation, then that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks, everyone. 12.2, and this is the staff report that was distributed just prior to the meeting this evening. That's staff report 13-2021, the EOLC commuter pilot application update. And so load that up here. The recommendation reads that council directs staff to submit a proposal to the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council for a commuter service from Brockville to Cardinal in partnership with the City of Brockville, Township of Augusta, and the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Over to you, Matthew. I see there's some really good numbers here, and the survey does seem to indicate that there would be some significant potential buy-in with regards to that transit service between Cardinal and Brockville.
So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So on January 14th, the guidelines were released in terms of the application and exactly what they were looking for. A large part of it is determining whether there's demand or not. And the focus of this particular pilot is on getting employees back and forth to work and being able to enhance that experience. So really that's largely what our survey was focused on, and it was sent out to businesses. Because of the focus, we wanted to get their feedback as opposed to the public in general. That doesn't mean that the public won't be able to use the bus, but certainly we needed the data to be able to substantiate the service for the funder. So when we sent it out, we had a great cross section. We had 54 responses from businesses in Prescott, Augusta, Edwardsburg, Cardinal. And so, and there was among a number of different sectors, including manufacturing, distribution warehouse, retail, restaurant, tourism, both business to business and business to consumer type services. So very happy from that perspective. We were hopeful that we were going to get a representative number, and we were able to do so. Over half of the respondents were from the town of Prescott, which we would expect just because we have a fairly large commercial sector and industrial sector. So we certainly gained the feedback from that group. When we asked the businesses if any of their employees would be interested in such a service that ran between Brockville and Cardinal, 30% of businesses said absolutely they can foresee employees that they currently have using this service. 26% weren't quite sure, and 44% said no, it probably wouldn't apply to their employees. So when we took a look, we asked a further question of those that identified that their employees would be interested, about how many employees in those businesses. So of those, we identified whether 1 through 10 or more than 10. And with just the responses that we received, you can see that there was 27, that they identified about 89, at least 89 people, if not more, that would be interested in using such a service. So we're pleasantly surprised that certainly that gets a number that is substantial, and certainly we didn't survey the entire group of businesses or receive responses from them. But we certainly, this is very positive in terms of that. We asked a further question of would this help you attract future employees? And just over half said absolutely it would help them. 15% said no, it wouldn't help them at all, and 34% weren't sure. So when you take a look at that, 85% of businesses were either positive or a maybe on whether this could help them in recruiting future employees. When we take a look at moving more to customers, a full 49% answered that having a commuter service would be attractive to their current customers. And then 43% felt that it would be attractive to help to attract new customers. So both of those were helpful. And then we asked a further question of, does this type of service help you to retain and grow your businesses in this area? And 55% said yes. So, we're very happy that, about half of the businesses in each of those cases identified that this service would be attractive to not only their employees, but to be able to do future recruiting and then able to also get customers. Where we found a lot of great feedback was in the comment section, and overall quite positive, and really it's incumbent upon us to really think about what the schedule would look like, what the timing of the bus service would be, both day of the week as well as time of day, and being able to make sure that those places, if they're going to have bus stops, also have complementary parking and things like that, to be able to really support bringing people together if they don't live directly on the bus route, that they can drive to the bus route and then take the bus from there. So that was, from the survey perspective, the feedback that we received. In terms of timing for the pilot project as well as the application deadline is February 12th, so not this Friday, but the following Friday. And then within 2 weeks, they would be notifying proponents whether they were successful or not. Approximately 2 weeks later, there would be the approval of the application, formal approval, as well as getting the contracts in place from a funding perspective. So the latest that we would be able to start, according to the Leadership Council, is April 15th, because they would like 6 months worth of data to be able to really evaluate how successful this was, and then be able to report that and finish it up by the end of the year. In conversation with the coordinator, we are allowed to ask for a later start date, but certainly that's currently the timeframe they're working under. But understand that the current environment and COVID restrictions certainly would have an impact on this type of service. There's still a number of questions that we have to answer in terms of exactly what days of the week and the time of days that it would run on. Currently, we're working on the premise that the City of Brockville would be the operator, and then any incremental costs would be adorned by the 3 partnering municipalities of Augusta, Edwardsburg Cardinal, and Prescott. So certainly there's lots of questions still to answer in terms of exactly what that schedule looks like, the costing of the driver, the fuel, insurance, all of those types of incremental costs. So what we're seeking this evening is simply to move forward with the application, and we'll continue working on answering those other questions and being able to be in good shape to report back to council if we're successful as to exactly what that financial commitment or model looks like, and to be able to further this project along. So certainly no firm commitment this evening to this project, but allows us to move forward with the application and being able to really delve into where that route would run, what times of day, as well as days of the week. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. Just the one comment for people out there, so people get the costing of this right away. Like, we're not committing to any expense tonight, but the other part of this, like on the other side of the pilot program, is if we are involved in a transit system, that does open up access to the provincial gas tax funding, which is huge here, quite frankly. And for those that that aren't aware, that may be watching, provincial gas tax funding is exclusively for the use of municipalities with transit systems, unlike the federal gas tax, which is administered in a very different way, and we end up having access to that for infrastructure dollars. So this would actually potentially open up a pool of funding that could make a program like this work for the foreseeable future going forward, along with our partners in Brockville, Augusta, and Edwardsburg Cardinal. So this is something that the Leadership Council has really started to look on the last couple of years. The Leadership Council as well, just so everyone knows, that's an entity created by the Mayor's Caucus and the Warden's Caucus a number of years ago after we did the economic development strategy for all of Eastern Ontario. So they're actually moving forward with a lot of action items on now. This is one of them, and there are a number of other projects that the EOLC is spearheading right now as well. So there's some other interesting angles that'll come forward in the weeks and months to come. This is just sort of the first one that's come to us. It's something that some of us around the EOMC table have been championing for quite some time because of the issues within all of Eastern Ontario with regards to every town, village, and even city is kind of an isolated entity. So any way we can bring people together and move people around will increase the ability for companies to hire, I would think. So at any rate, I'll open it up for discussion and comment. Anyone have any comments this evening? Councilor Jansman?
Thank you for this report. I think it could be potentially so exciting, and the only way that something like this, because it has so many risks involved in not working out, is the implementation, the research, the homework beforehand, and that seems to me is what's getting done now. So it will only increase the possibility of this actually succeeding. And we really do need to at least give it a try. It's environmentally friendly. It's economically, developmentally friendly, if that's a term. It could have so many positive effects, along with the funding that Mayor Todd made mention to. So I'm very, very excited about it, and I look forward to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Jansman. Other comments, questions? Okay, it looks like nothing further this evening. So I guess the one thing that and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this one tonight, but in terms of the partners, Brockville is, Brockville is the key here, and obviously they're still willing to go ahead. I mean, just COVID's launched a lot of financial challenges at all of us. So obviously Brockville is still committed. Augusta definitely seemed quite enthusiastic. I will say Edwardsburg Cardinal, I think they turned it down initially and then brought it back and approved it after the fact. So we do have, like, all partners are on board with this, Mr. Armstrong. So the only thing I would be concerned about is we might have to take on a little added expense in the pilot project if someone were to drop out or there were any concerns there with one or more of the partners.
So certainly, I believe the report's going tomorrow evening to Brockville City Council or committee to just make sure that everyone's still on board. Their major focus is that this not add to the overall operating of the bus service, and so that's why it's incumbent upon the three partners. But certainly, they're providing in-kind support, and So not having to go out and purchase a bus is a huge bonus of working with them because they'd be able to use a surplus bus. They already have the drivers in place that have training. They already have insurance in place. So there's a lot of things that that they add, and from an in-kind perspective, that would be very difficult to replicate at a no-cost type of concept if we didn't have that partner at the table. So certainly we appreciate Brockville in being able to explore this and move that forward. When we take a look at Augusta and Edwardsburg Cardinal, I believe both are willing participants, and certainly see the benefits of doing that. If perhaps one didn't move forward, then certainly that changes the equation a little bit in terms of the route that we would take and how we would be able to offer the service. But certainly, I think if you were just to look at Brockville and Prescott in isolation, then you'd be able to shorten up the route timings, things like that, and still be able to provide a great service. And we saw that from the responses, that vast majority, over half, were from Prescott, and largely in favor of such a service. So certainly there's some leeway in terms of how we end up designing this and where we go with it. But everyone is on board, continues to work for the common goal, and we're very happy with being able to work with 3 of our neighboring municipalities and to bring this to fruition.
Yeah, it's great to see, because as everyone knows, we did begin discussions on this pre-COVID, which seems 100 years ago now, but Brockville did approach us about the possibility right at the start of this term, pretty much. So it's nice to see now we've got some added support from the EOLC here too. And hopefully we can get this off the ground in the next little while. Councillor McConnell, you had your hand up a moment ago, I think.
Yeah, Mayor Todd, just one concern that I have, certainly not about the bus service. We've gone far enough down this road. I think we might as well keep going. But Matthew mentioned that they would want us to start on the 15th of April. I think we'd have to be nuts to start a bus service during COVID. I know I wouldn't be climbing on a bus with anybody. I can't imagine what kind of figures that we would have going forward for the first 6 months if there's no ridership due to COVID. It would make no sense to me to start this before next fall.
Certainly a good concern there, because we don't know where we're really going to be at that point with regards to what's going to be open, what's not. It's not that far off. Matt, has that come up at all in discussions with the EOLC? And that's a pretty tight time frame given the circumstances, as Councillor McConnell noted.
Absolutely. So that was the basis of my discussion over the last 2 weeks with the coordinator, and they realized that these are tight timelines and a difficult situation. So they said address that in our application and explain exactly the benefits of being able to wait, and if they're able to, because they do have upper government funding for this pilot project. It's really up to the funders in how they are willing to get the leeway or not. So we did address that. They said more than happy, include that as part of your application, and we will take that back to the funders to get their feedback as well.
Yeah, I can note that Diane Tarian is, she's the EOMC chair, and she's also the co-chair of EOLC. I'll note that to that. I'm assuming this is a concern they've probably heard from other potential applicants too, but I'll send a quick note to Diane and just see if this has come up at the board level with the EOLC, because it's a really good point. You'd hate to see the numbers skewed so dramatically that just, it looks like a failure when it really is another COVID-related casualty of everything else that's happening. Any other discussion on this item tonight? Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. Just comment on the bus part of things, that the buses are running for school-age children, and they take the appropriate measures during COVID. So I'm thinking that we're not going to get a bus full of employees that's going to fill the bus. There's probably going to be, sit every other seat or whatever. It's something that I'm sure that the committee has considered.
Yep.
So.
There are some real precautions regarding that, of course, right now. And I'm sure the city of Brockville has, those sorts of things in place. But if it still have the numbers, it could still really affect the project just in the end data. So Matt, you had a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we did address that with the city of Brockville in particular, and they've outfitted all of their buses to be COVID compliant. And so they're following all of those guidelines, and anything that we would move forward with would be following those guidelines as well. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Any further comments before I call the vote? With that, then, no further comments. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And again, looking forward to this, and want to thank Brockville, Augusta, and Edwardsburg Cardinal for partnering with us on this. It looks to be another great regional initiative. We can get something really good here, hopefully rolling for the entire South Grenville, South Leeds area. So with that, we're on to item 12.3, and that's tonight's portion of the budget presentations for 2021. Tonight up, we have environmental and water and wastewater, and I believe Matt, are you going to share the screen for that one again? But I will note, everyone, this was emailed to everyone a couple hours ago as well, as I mentioned off the top. So Matthew, please take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone is seeing the budget presentation now. Okay, very good. So this evening, we are going to go through the budget timeline, environmental budget, water and wastewater budget. So we're now at our fourth meeting. It's February 1st today. Welcome to February, everyone. And as I mentioned, we're going to cover environmental, water and wastewater. Our next meeting, February 16th, and just to note for council, that will be on a Tuesday because Family Day is Monday. We'll be covering revenue and taxation, as well as going through the prioritization of capital and operational projects. So environmental services is made up of storm sewers, waste collection, waste disposal, and waste diversion. So storm sewers, we had a 2020 budget of $69,300. We're projected to spend about $60,000. If you'll remember, earlier in the year, we did do a couple of projects that were related to stormwater management that we used some of the savings to be able to apply against those projects. And that was on, I believe, Hyde Street as well as Water Street. So when we take a look at that, we believe we're able to maintain the same storm sewer budget for 2021, and that allows us to do the cleaning of catch basins as well as being able to address some of those issues as they arise. And then, so budget to budget is a 0% increase, and then dollar increase, and then budget to projection is approximately 8,700. Waste collection, and so we had a budget of 108,000 in 2020. We're expected to spend just a little bit more than that, and then in 2021, it's 111,700. That's incorporating the new waste management through Limerick, the new agreement. And so small increase of $3,700 from budget to budget, and about 3,000 from budget to projection. Waste disposal, this has increased substantially. In the course of 2020, we were using La Flèche, which then became GFL, to dispose of our waste. So it would be dropped off, they would pick it up, and they would take it from there. That not only has the cost per ton increased substantially, and now we're no longer using GFL and La Flèche, but actually just also doing disposal through Limerick. But the number of tons that we are seeing, it has increased fairly substantially as well. So from budget to budget, it's about an increase of $36,500, but budget to projection, so we've been incurring these costs throughout this year, is a $5,700 increase. Finally, waste diversion, and really that's our recycling program. The budget for 2020 was 84,200. The projection for 2020 is 106,900, and that's due to the fact that in 2020 that it's no longer free to drop off recycling at recycling depots. So now they charge by the ton, and I believe for mixed containers it's $91 a ton, and then for the fibers that we pick up such as newspaper, cardboard, those types of things, it's in the $65 range per ton. So that's a substantial increase, 28,500 from budget year over year, and then about a $5,700 increase. So we've been experiencing those throughout this year. So when we take a look at that, a large increase from budget to budget, but not that much of an increase from budget to projection, because we have been experiencing those increase in tipping fees in the course of 2020. Now, that being said, that looks like a very large increase, and it is 68,700 from year over year. However, our bag tag fees, that is generating more as well by approximately $30,000. And so that's partially offset by the 68,000 that you're seeing here today. So not completely the end of the world, but certainly a substantial increase. The other part that recycling has gone up by is adding the attendance to the compost site, which by and large has been well accepted, as well as we've really been able to cut down on the amount of handling and inappropriate dumping of non-recyclable and compostable material at that site. So that's an increase of approximately, I believe, 15,000 to the recycling budget that's accounted for in this budget as well. So I'll just stop there for a moment. And is there any questions that anyone had on any of those? Councillor McConnell? Or sorry, it's Councillor Young.
Councillor Young, please.
Just out of curiosity, Matthew, what's the cost per ton of garbage?
It's approximately $100 per ton.
Oh, so it is cheaper to for the recycling. I thought it might be more for the recycling.
No, it's just it's not a significant amount cheaper, but it is slightly cheaper to put it into the recycling stream.
Thank you.
Councillor Jansman, please.
Matthew, when you mentioned that the changes that we have had over the last year, did we get any kind of like, are they obligated to give us like a 90-day heads up on this? Or if we were to go into the next year, would we have any surprises? Or are we now in a agreement for things like the increase in recycling?
So that's all dependent upon the recycler and them receiving them. That being said, Limerick does not add any markup on that fee. All they do is whatever they're charged by the recycler, they charge back to the town. So, and really this is a continuation of what we saw starting in late 2018 with, right. With no more exports of recycling material. And now they're ending up where they're just building up so much of this that they're incurring costs to try and recycle it. So that's really what we're seeing from that perspective. We're not expecting anything in the course of 2021. And I believe the first set of municipalities will be going to the provincial system, province-wide system, starting in January of 2023. So I wouldn't expect too many changes between now and then, but it's possible we'll see some changes in 2023.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jansman. Councillor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Matthew, I'm supposing here that the amount of waste that we're collecting and therefore the cost to dispose of it, and the amount of recycling that we're collecting and therefore the cost to dispose of it, is had a boost because so many people are staying home. They're not eating out. There's more waste food going into the garbage. There's more waste plastics going into the garbage. And I guess that would explain the increase in the purchase of garbage bags too. But given the fact that COVID is hopefully a limited situation, I would suspect maybe a year from now, we will start to see a downward trend again. And hopefully this whole thing will reduce, probably not as much as it's gone up, but it should reduce some. Do you kind of share that hope?
Absolutely. And so that's one of the things when we get to the revenue side is, do we want to apply some of our COVID funding towards this, what I'm going to call hopeful blip in the amount of garbage that's being currently produced? So that you're exactly right. As restaurants start to be able to open up again, as people are able to travel more, things like that, then we would expect that usage to come down, because it's exactly correlating with those stay-at-home orders and restrictions that we're seeing that increase in garbage.
Thank you.
Anything else on this section of the budget presentation tonight? The only comment I'd have is just connecting with what Councillor Jansman mentioned, and we just have to continually be educating residents on what we're doing with waste collection and recycling, because that issue continues to come up with people every time someone has an item rejected. We just have to keep that up and let people know that it's not us, it's an international issue. It's something that we're all facing now. There's been a crisis in how the Western world handles recycling the last couple of years, and we just need to get that out there continually, what's taken, what's not taken, and the reasons why we're not taking some items now that historically we have. I know it's been a couple of years now since these changes really kicked in, but it still comes up quite often. So we just have to be on this to educate people pretty much consistently that this is why it is the way it is. The province is involved. And what's the time frame on that again, Matthew? 2023 or so, that the province is taking it over essentially, or making that shift?
So they have a 3-year implementation period starting in 2023 with mostly the very large municipalities, and it doesn't get to the smaller and rural municipalities until 2025. So we've been confirmed for some time in 2025, but we certainly remain hopeful that we will hold to those timelines and not be further delayed.
Yeah, good point. And something else we really need to educate the public on as well. Again, not us, and it's being addressed from a provincial level right now. It's just taking longer than I think everyone would like, but that's just the way things go. So please continue with the water and wastewater portion of the presentation. Thank
you very much. So water and wastewater is made up of 4 distinct portions of the budget, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining them. I think I've had feedback from a number of councillors to say, how does water and wastewater, how's the budget constructed? And then how does it break down? So I'm just going to try and work through those this evening, but wastewater is the collection of, from the time it leaves the house to the time it arrives at the wastewater treatment plant. And then obviously the wastewater treatment plant is everything that's done at the plant and then back out to the St. Lawrence, which is the discharge port. Water treatment plant, that certainly starts in the St. Lawrence River and comes into the water treatment plant. And then the water distribution is everything after the water treatment plant and ends up at people's homes. So it flows through the water mains, ends up at the water tower. From the water tower, it continues being distributed throughout the system, and then arrives at people's homes. So those are kind of the 4 distinct areas, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So we're going to start with the water budget. And so, as I mentioned, water treatment starts in the St. Lawrence, goes through the water treatment plant, and stops just as it's leaving the water treatment plant. Water distribution, as I mentioned, includes the water mains that are in the road, the water tower, as well as the water hydrants. So all of that is attached to the pressurized water system, and really that's how that those are the two major components when it comes to the water budget. Water revenues are required by provincial dictate that it has to cover not only the cost of operating the system, but also replacing the water system without property tax subsidization. So that's an important part to remember, is that we're not allowed to subsidize the operations of our water and wastewater or the replacement, the capital replacement, by adding that to tax bills. So from a water budget perspective, so on the first column is the grand total of the 2021 budget, and it breaks down into about $1.2 million in water charges that are charged to each of the customers, as well as our neighboring municipalities. We do sell some amounts to Augusta and Edwardsburg Cardinal. Interest on the reserves, there's a small amount that's in there as well. And then occupancy changes for those changing addresses. Perhaps it's a new build, and so we have those charges as well. So 48% of the water charges go towards operating the water treatment plant, as well as the capital side of that. 52% go towards the water distribution, both capital and operating. So from an expense perspective, again, total revenue has to equal total expenses in this case. So a total of $1.2 million in revenue, and then you can see how it breaks down in terms of the salaries, supplies, services, debt payment. Debt payment is one area where I've mentioned in a couple of previous meetings that we have a substantial debt payment ending this year, and so you're seeing the $16,965 being 1/4 of the total previous debt payment that is now ending in March of 2021, and then that additional $16,000 will go into reserve starting in 2022. So you can also see the reserve contribution there. So just shy of $250,000 of the total of $1.2 million goes into reserve, and that's what's supporting the capital side of our replacement. So from a water treatment plant perspective, again, anything to do with the water treatment plant from a capital perspective is held in a reserve fund, and then the estimated capital contribution for 2021 is $118,000. There's also a separate reserve fund when it comes to the water mains, hydrants, and water tower, and our contribution for 2021 is just shy of $130,000. So really, that's how that total budget breaks down. And we wanted to take the opportunity this evening to kind of talk about how water, wastewater are each built up, and then be able to answer any questions. So at this point, I'll take a pause and hand it back to the mayor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. So we'll open it up for any comments, questions on this portion of the presentation tonight. Councilor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Matthew, you mentioned that the $16,965 is 1/4 of what our debt payment has been in the past for whatever improvement that was made. 4 times that is around what, 68,000 somewhere. Is 68,000 being put into reserves? Are we keeping the same amount in the budget and applying the whole thing to reserves? Or are we dropping that amount and only going to be putting the $16,965 into reserves from here on?
So great question. And so your first interpretation was correct. So any dollar that we're not spending on debt is now going into reserve. So because total revenue has to equal total expenses, then that's kind of the formula that I'm working with. And so anytime that we're able to reduce any of those items, then we're increasing the reserve payment in that effect. So you're exactly right. The reserve would be about $45,000 less if we had the same debt payment as we'd have in previous years, whereas it's now increased by about $45,000. So for argument's sake, it was about $80,000 was the contribution last year, and now with this, it's now $128,000.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Councilor McConnell, any other comments, questions on this section of the budget presentation this evening?
No, thank you, Mayor Todd.
Anyone else? Seeing we're good for now, Matthew, please.
Right, thank you very much. So moving on to wastewater. And so again, it's made up of two components. Wastewater collection starts at the lot line of each property owner and includes all of the sanitary pipes that are in the ground, usually underneath the road. It includes the wastewater pumping stations and the sanitary sewer manholes. So all of that combined is a system, and that's the wastewater collection system. Where it stops is at the entrance to the wastewater treatment plant. So at the plant, now we're dealing with actually bringing in that wastewater, treating it, being able to separate the solids from the liquids, ensuring that it meets provincial standards in terms of the discharge and the effluent that's being treated, and that it's safe to return back to the water source. So all of that is kind of in the wastewater treatment plant side. And again, wastewater revenues have to cover not only the operating of the system, but also the replacement, the capital replacement thereof. So, and it can't be subsidized by property taxes. So very similar to the water budget, but simply on the back end, so to speak, of that. No pun intended. So when we take a look at the wastewater budget for 2021, we have wastewater charges, and they come to about $1.55 million. And wastewater treatment is significantly more expensive than water treatment. And so we allocate 68.75% of the wastewater charges to wastewater treatment, whereas only 31.25% is put towards wastewater collection. We have interest, so there's a large amount of interest that we are able to generate. We have approximately $2.5 million in the wastewater treatment plant fund, and $1 million of that is in equity. So we mentioned in 2019, which was our first year with that fund, that we generated over $200,000 in earnings in that year. Last year was a very tumultuous year from an equity perspective, but we're happy to say that it's still netted over $40,000 at the end of the year. And then we always budget approximately 3% in terms of revenue. And so if we go back to that traditional model, then for interest, then that's how the 82,000 is derived. Edwardsburg Cardinal does provide a separate cost sharing for the wastewater treatment plant, and that's estimated to be 71,000 based on current flow rates. And similar to how we have water occupancy changes, we also have wastewater occupancy changes. So change of addresses, new people joining the system, moving in and out, those types of things. And so we allocate that to the wastewater collection. So very similar on the expense side, we have salaries, supplies, services, debt payments. And here as well, on the wastewater collection, that has decreased substantially. And so that's allowed us to, because of that debt payment reduction, increase our contribution to reserves to 197,000. So certainly we're very happy with that we're able to reduce our debt payment because of that, and then be able to increase the reserve contribution, which is important because those, from a wastewater collection as well as a water distribution perspective, both of those help support our redevelopment of streets. So we use gas tax funding, federal gas tax funding, as well as the contributions to reserves to be able to support our street redevelopment. And so those are critical things that we have to continue working on. And as we've talked about previously and have previously approved, Dibble Street East is the project for 2021. And our intention is to tackle projects every 2 years, to be able to make sure that we're keeping our infrastructure up to date and not falling behind in having possible catastrophic failures. So a total of 300,000, 305,000 almost would go to reserves in 2021. So just taking a look at the overall, the more traditional way I've been showing the budgets is the 2021 budget or 2020 budget was 2.9 million. Then from a projection standpoint, we're looking at a little bit shy, about $30,000 shy. That has largely to do with the interest not generating as much as we expected it to, but certainly not a concern from a operating and capital standpoint. And then the 2021 budget would be 2.93 million. So a small increase of about 12,000 in revenue and expenses. But as you can see, about $550,000 going to reserve to be able to support not only our treatment plants, but the water and sewer work that we need to do as well. So the budget, as you see this evening, does not contemplate having an increase in water and wastewater rates. You'll remember that the last time we implemented them was, I believe, for June of 2019. We were intending on incorporating a further increase in 2020. However, due to COVID, made the decision not to implement that. And then due to the continuation of COVID, with this particular iteration of the draft budget, that we haven't included an increase at this point, but certainly that's for council to debate further and decide. So overall, that's kind of the water and wastewater budgets. And then we can probably stop there, and then I can just walk through as to where we are with the overall budget.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong. So open it up for comments, questions. I see Councillor Young. Ray, go ahead.
Thank you, Brett. Matthew, there's no inclusion in this budget for any new development in either Edwardsburg or Augusta. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions from members of council this evening? Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I just wanted to thank Matthew for breaking down this budget. I think it's a good reminder for everyone, and it's a good learning experience. You just refresh our memory exactly where things are and how it works. And so I really appreciated him taking the time this evening and just going back to the basics and for everybody to take a step back and learn a little bit more. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Other discussion from members of council on the water and wastewater budgets this evening? Seeing nothing further. So back to you, Matthew, to review and summarize this evening.
Thank you very much. So with the inclusion of the environmental budget, and so we always kind of break down the operating side from water and wastewater, because again, one can't subsidize the other. And so this evening, we have a total 2021 budget of almost 8.9 million. So if you take a look at what we did previously from an operating perspective, we have been going through each of those areas. We only have two relatively small budgets left to discuss, which we will at the next meeting, and that being the tourism budget as well as the ECDEV budget. But as you can see, we also received additional information from joint services from the United Counties that our original estimates were about $25,000 too high, which we're very happy about, that we're able to reduce those. And so overall, we have about an $84,000 increase in costs from one year to the next, from a budget to budget perspective. That's about 1% of the budgets we've covered so far. And as I mentioned, the two remaining budgets are relatively small. So budget to projection, it's about a $500,000 increase. And as we've kind of gone through each of those budgets, we've talked at length of where we've been able to save and those areas that we've really strived to be able to bridge the gap, because we knew 2020 going to be a difficult year from a revenue interest perspective as well as fees. And so certainly we've taken that opportunity. This budget, I think, as we've come forward so far, is reasonable. There are areas where throughout the year we will be able to save money to counteract those unexpected things that happen. But we're pleased to be able to bring it forward to this point. So from water and wastewater, as we just mentioned, it's going up by approximately $11,500, but no increase in fees and revenue at this point. So just wanted to kind of take a stock as to where we are and then talk about where we're going next. And so February 16th will be revenue and taxation, and as well as the economic development and tourism expense budgets and project prioritization. So at the end of that meeting, we'll have a good feeling for whatever gap there might be that exists and how we would start to address that. And certainly that's why we set aside March to be able to look at not only our service delivery review, but our strategic plan and make sure that those two documents are aligning with what we're saying from a budget perspective. So that's really the update for this evening, and we'll be back February 16th to further kind of bring both sides of the budget together.
Thanks again, Mr. Armstrong, for the very good presentation this evening. Open it up for a last kick at the can. Members of council, any other comments, questions this evening before we leave off? Oh, looks like we're pretty good. So thanks again, Matthew, for the update tonight. And the number seems pretty good so far. And obviously we're not done yet, but we're moving along fairly quickly now, and we're getting through a lot of the necessary departments and so forth. And the one thing I did want to mention, though, is that 1% we're basically aiming towards. We still have on the table that extra 1% too for infrastructure, correct? We did discuss that, I think, right at the beginning of the budget process. I do remember a couple of councilors referring to it, and I'd certainly like to, if at all possible, reimpose that this year, because we did take a break on it, and obviously our infrastructure needs are still out there, and that extra 1% does come with some value. Obviously, that's not a decision we're making tonight, but that's something that's going to have to come up for further discussion to get everybody's comfort level on that one before we finish the process as well. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that item on there as well. But otherwise, numbers look good, and thanks so much for bringing everything forward to us this evening. And we'll get back to this right after Family Day on February 16th. So thanks again for the presentations tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving along, 13, we have no resolutions this evening on the agenda. 14, bylaws, and surely this won't be much discussion. 14.1 is the animal control bylaw. The recommendation is that bylaw 05-2021, being a bylaw to provide for the licensing and registering of animals and prohibiting the running at large, for regulating kennels, and to regulate the keeping of animals in the town of Prescott, be read and passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and sealed by the seal of the corporation. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Shankar, seconded by Councilor Ostrander. I think he just beat you, Ray. So I'll turn it over to Matthew and Sean on this for comments. Obviously, this generated quite a bit of discussion in the community after it was raised 2 weeks ago. But this has been brought back pretty much in whole form from what we had, but there's a little more discussion that needs to be had on it in the implementation this evening as well. So Matt, did you want to take us into that first off and lead us into the discussion?
Very much. We've incorporated the feedback from the discussion from our last meeting and being able to bring this forward. At the same time, I think we only received one further comment today from a member of the public, and certainly it was along previous lines when it comes to caps. So more than happy to kind of work through it this evening. I'm going to pass it over to Sean Merriman, our CBO and manager of building a bylaw, to be able to address any specific questions and be able to move it forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So Sean?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, it certainly generated a fair amount of discussion, but not necessarily a fair amount of correspondence, at least with the bylaw department office. We did receive one email today, and I did speak to the person that sent the email today. She had some concerns about cats being in a collar or a harness. And she asked me to reach out to a local veterinary to confirm, and I did. And kind of like everything else, when you're going to be a responsible pet owner, it's important that you buy the right type. You just don't put anyone's belt around their neck. It's important that you buy a proper cat harness or a collar that's meant to work its way through the bushes, shrubs, or snap off if it needs to because it got entangled. Kind of like you would with a dog too, right? It's important to keep an eye on it and make sure that it doesn't get tangled up in its leash. That person also had a concern about the numbers. They thought there should be a higher number than the 5. I did explain that it was important, though, to have a number. What that number is certainly up to debate, but it does allow bylaw a little bit more flexibility when there is a firm number and you go into a situation where you've received a concern, that you're not necessarily looking for neglect and stuff like that. You're just looking for the the overall numbers. Now, kind of like it's been with the previous bylaw, just because you end up with 6 animals doesn't mean you automatically get charged. I mean, we expect you to tell us how many animals are in the house and explain how they came about, due to the fact that people and families come together and split up, and sometimes children leave home and come back and everything else like that. There's not really an issue when someone ends up with one more animal or something like that, when there's a reasonable explanation on where it's coming from. But it does, it gives you a place to start. And I don't know that 5's the right number, but I don't know that it's really that far off what the right number is for Prescott. I had a couple other questions, including what a couple livestock things were. It is actually keeping animals for the sake of their fur, their meat. Like I said, I think we've answered most of them. I had a few people that were concerned about the fact that fines were going to be doubled from what they were. However, again, that's a decision that's up to council where they set the fine at. All I do ask council to remember is that, one, giving a fine isn't our first option in bylaw enforcement. Hasn't been in the past, and it won't be in the future. By the time we get to the point that we're actually charging someone, usually they've had opportunities to correct whatever the issue was. And the problem with animal control, anyways, is as of right now, any of the times we do charge someone, we have to go to court. And as you can imagine, court doesn't happen with the wave of a wand or anything like that. So it is important to keep the amounts high enough that at least it pays for some of the staff's time when we're in it, so it's not falling onto the taxpayer in general. And the second thing to remember is, even though we set the fine, anyone that has economic issues can certainly explain to the court system what the problems are. And I don't think I can ever remember a time where they said, well, we don't care, and left the full amount anyway. So I think the answer, the feedback from the fines has been explained. And although if you want them changed, the council wants them changed, it can be. I think it has been a reasonable amount, especially when you compare it to other fines for other misbehaviors, whether it's speeding or it's not necessarily an animal control, but just in general, not quite following the rules of the community. That is kind of it from the bylaw department. I think we've covered it all. As I like to tell people, the nice thing, it wasn't really about putting a cat, on a leash, so much as reminding people that they have to be responsible pet owners whenever they own a pet. And although the media headline certainly grabbed people's attention. What's funny is when you actually read the story, they did a fair representation of explaining that it was about responsible pet ownership. Not that we want necessarily people to be wandering around the city with their cats on a leash, although the person that I did get the email from today told me that she does take her cat around on a leash. So there is the odd person that is doing it already. So that's it from bylaw, unless there's some specific questions from council.
Thanks very much, Sean. Just a quick comment before I open it up on, because obviously the media story, the headline in particular, as you noted, did generate some discussion, and just wanted to clarify a couple of things for residents. This did not result on any. This whole issue was just it's about the update of an animal control bylaw that is quite a number of years old. I don't think the provisions in have been updated since, was it 1994? I think we looked at. So we're looking at something that's almost 30 years old. It wasn't like we just decided, boy, let's look at the cat problem in Prescott or cats in Prescott. This is just an overall update of the animal control bylaw. And the language in here is quite similar to that in many other municipalities in Ontario and across Canada. The animal fines, they're being basically doubled if this passes tonight, because they haven't been adjusted for 27 years. And we've had this item come up at different times in the past, how we've been losing money on animal control in areas where we've got to have deal with veterinarian costs and chip reading and so forth. And I'll note that one item that I don't think was covered in the media was that we're buying a chip reader with any additional proceeds here with regards with cat licensing and whatever potential revenue might arise with regards to fines and strays. We're looking to buy that chip reader, which will actually help us more quickly return lost animals and deal with that here right in the town of Prescott without bothering with the veterinarian costs, reading the chips and so forth. So we're actually really we're trying to. It's all about looking after people's pets and doing the best we can to return them to the owners as quickly as possible. And in regards to the whole leash provision and cats wandering, I received some notes on this, like I'm sure all of council did, with people very concerned that they might have their cats picked up right away and so forth. And I just want to reassure people that's not the case. But we have always had animal nuisance bylaws in place for the longest time. So you've always had to be a responsible owner, whether it's a cat or a dog, and that's not going to change under this new bylaw. We're not focusing in on any particular pet or anything of the sort, but we're just trying to encourage responsible ownership and sort of leveling the playing field in a way between dogs and cats, so the language doesn't just specify dogs, that it actually is more broad-based. But that's the way the bylaw has always been interpreted to begin with, because it's always been about the nuisance provisions and so forth. So I don't think for people that were getting a little excited about this, I don't think we're going to see any real dramatic changes whatsoever with regards to how we move forward here. We're always going to be a dog and a cat friendly town. As Sean mentioned, we move forward with animal control. It's about education. It's about dialogue, warnings when needed, and fines only when absolutely needed. So this is not something that's going to impact on residents, I would say, in any real undue fashion. It's just really a modernization of a very old animal control bylaw. So that's it for my soapbox tonight. So I'll step down and pass it on to others for comment. No further comments? Councillor McConnell.
You were going to get away too easy there. I read through this today, and I actually made a few stars here, and I sent my concerns along to Sean this afternoon, so we would have an opportunity to look at them. And he has addressed some of them when he was speaking, but I'd like to just go through them briefly if I can, and see what the rest of council has to say about it. I know the control issue. I'm on page 21 of 32 now. The control issue, Mayor Todd, I know both you and I had discussed that. Dogs off leash in certain areas of town, running, catching frisbees and whatever. And I've discussed that with people that I've met out walking, or they've discussed it with me, and I've had comments both way that people don't think they should have to have their dogs leashed. My dog doesn't cause any trouble. And the other side, of course, my dog's been bit. Everybody should have their dog on a leash. So the old bylaw that we've had since '94, I believe, refers to the having control of your pet dog. I believe it's animal or dog right now. This part here doesn't mention anything about a leash. It says shall include care and custody, having at all times the ability to manage, direct, restrict, and restrain the movements of the animal. Now, you might say restrain the movements of the animal. It means that it's on a leash, but it doesn't say leash. And I'm wondering if somebody gets picked up for not having a dog on a leash, is this going to be a problem if it goes to court? Or should the word leash be put in there?
Thanks very much, Councillor McConnell. I see Mr. Armstrong with his hand up. Matt, you have a response for that?
Absolutely. So the concept of control is required at all times. A leash is only required when you're off the owner's property. So what we're saying, and the specific reason why we left leash out of control, is that you still have to have control of your animal even on your own property, but you don't have to have them leashed until you're off of that property. And so when you get to 5C, when it talks about nuisance or animals running at large, it then specifies that anytime you're not on the owner's property, then at that time you have to have a leash. So that's why there's the distinction between control, which is required at all times, whereas the leash is only required off property.
Very well explained. I'll accept that. Going down a little further, it says guide dog shall mean a dog trained and certified as a guide for the blind, hearing impaired, or other size handicapped. Is that different from a service dog that people have for other, say, emotional problems, not physical problems? Or should that be included in that, or is that something different?
So I think the key distinction between guide and service dog is that in this context is that it's been trained and certified, as opposed to I think airlines had to change their definition as well, because people were claiming that pets that weren't certified or trained were being classified as service, as emotional support or whatever that might be. So as long as we keep the definition of guide or service as being trained and certified, then we can use them potentially interchangeably. But I think that's the key distinction, is that if they're trained and certified, then you would be exempt from the tag and some other portions of the bylaw. But if they're not certified and trained, then the rest of the bylaw would be applicable.
Okay, thank you. On top of page 22, it says outside dog shall mean a dog which is kept as a pet on residential property and is regularly kept outside the residence and associated outbuildings on a full-time basis. That's not a dog that's kept as a pet, in my opinion. This is too cold a climate to have a dog outside on a full-time basis. I'm not so sure that should be in there. I'm not so sure we should actually allow people to have dogs kept outside all time in this climate. It's very hot in the summer. It's very cold in the winter.
So there are a number of breeds that lend themselves to being outside versus inside. But certainly we can check where it refers to it in the bylaw. That's in particular just in the definitions, but we'll see how it refers to it in the bylaw and what stipulations it has for that.
Supervision at the bottom of that page. Sean already discussed the number of animals, which he has now at 5, I believe. Honestly, I don't think we got any business limiting the number of pets a person has. What we should be concerned with is their care and the nuisance value of those pets. I know I've lived in this neighborhood a long time. I've had neighbors with one animal that was just a total pain. And I've had neighbors with a half a dozen pets that never bothered anybody. It's how they're looked after. I mean, I'm willing to go on with council on this, but I really don't think that should be part of our mandate authorizing the number of animals that you should have.
Thank you. Councilor McConnell, is there anything else, or was that?
Yeah, a couple more. Animal licensing restrictions and regulations. That's number 2, about 2/3 of the way up on page 23. The owner of any dog or cat on the first day of January of each year or soon thereafter, such dog, blah, blah, blah. It has to be registered. I have a problem with this. Now, I know Sean says that we're not going to be going around knocking on doors, telling people that they have to buy a cat license. I mean, he's not going to be driving down the street if he sees a cat in somebody's window, knock on their door and ask them if they have a tag for it. But the way this reads, it's a mandatory thing. And if somebody has a house cat, they've had a house cat for 6 years, the cat never goes outside, I don't see any reason why we should compel them to buy a tag. So perhaps the wording is what I'm opposed to. And the same thing with a dog, as far as that goes. If you have a little dog, a Chihuahua or something that only goes into your backyard to have a pee and a poo, you never take her for a walk, it's never off your property, I don't see any reason why they should have to buy a dog tag. But by the same token, if either one of those animals should happen to get lost and nabbed, well, then those people should be compelled to have to buy a tag to get the animal back and have to buy a tag every year thereafter. I suspect council isn't going to go along with me on that, but that is my feelings on it.
Mr. Armstrong, you had a comment on that last point of Councilor McConnell's?
So I think from a staff perspective, when I go back and take a look at why do we have an animal control bylaw, and at its heart, it's to try and get pets back to their owners safely and timely if they happen to get lost, run, or get loose, that sort of thing. So if we don't do the pre-work to gather the information as to where they live and where they're supposed to go, then it's going to be very difficult to get them back in a timely and safe manner. So that would be my only kind of response to that, to be able to say the goal of this bylaw is not to make money. The goal of this bylaw, in my mind, from a staff perspective, is to get pets that have gone astray or inadvertently gotten loose, that we get them back safely, and the cost or the revenue that we generate from fees does not come close to defraying the cost of getting those pets back safely and timely. So that's the only kind of point that I'm trying to make is do you collect the information to get them back quickly and safely, or once it's already happened, it's not necessarily going to help us in achieving that goal.
I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. We're still friends. On page 26, numbered actually D and E. Now I'll go with E. Any animal seized and impounded and not called for by the owner thereof within 5 clear days from the time of acknowledged notification may be sold or adopted through the pound keeper or through a rescue shelter. That could be problematic if you don't know whose dog it is. It's acknowledged notification. So if I'm away on holidays for 3 weeks, I don't know, my dog has been nabbed, somebody else is looking after it. It hasn't been acknowledged. They're really, the word acknowledged in there in the 5 days, I think could cause some problems.
Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Merriman, any comment on that one? Councilor McConnell, are you looking to possibly extend that beyond the 5 days?
Well, quite frankly, when I read it this afternoon, I missed the acknowledged word that was in there. That I just didn't pick up on that. So that is from the time that somebody is notified, I take that to mean then they have 5 days to pick up the dog. I don't have, or a cat or whatever it is. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that's lots of time. I'm just wondering how you're going to notify people if you don't have any idea whose dog it is. That would mean wherever it goes, it's kept forever and not being able to be adopted out. You follow me?
Mr. Merriman?
Yes, Sean.
Yeah.
Just want to
Oh,
go
sorry.
anchor right after. Gory, do you have a comment on this specific item? I'll just let
Well,
you.
isn't that what the dog tags are for? Are the tags? Once you find a lost dog, they're wearing the tag. It's easy to find out who the owner is. If you're away for 3 weeks, I'm sure the person that's looking after your dog that's missing will contact you to let you know your dog's missing.
That's
Then you
assuming
can-
the dog has a tag. And
Well, if you quit telling people they shouldn't buy a tag for the indoor cat and the indoor dog, they should all get a tag and they'll be fine. Just saying.
Sean, you were going to make a comment there as well?
Yeah, I was going to emphasize that it is once they acknowledge that we have the animals, and it's about finding the right balance. I mean, I don't know if 5's too long or too short. I do know that the town ends up paying for the boarding fees for every day that we keep an animal, that we cannot find someone to, acknowledge that it's theirs and that they want it. Again, with responsible pet ownership comes the fact that you have a responsibility to know that your animal is missing. And I can understand how the odd thing may occur where, someone has, and I'm going to use a medical reason. For some reason, they have a medical thing. They don't know that their animal's gone missing, but someone should know. And one of the things that we've done in order to get the amount of animal control pickups down over the last 2 years is actually, if the animal's contained and in a safe environment, we actually announce it on social media what we have, and it's been an amazingly effective tool to getting animals back, because usually there's very few scenarios where someone doesn't know, that absolutely no one knows that an animal is missing. And it's about finding the right balance. And I thought, anyways, as a staff member, that 5 days was reasonable for someone, once they've been notified, to make arrangements to pick up the animal, whether it's them or they say, Sean, give it to my aunt, my uncle, or my neighbor, whatever the case may be. Because again, I don't want someone to think, well, you've got to keep them, and they come back and then they don't want to pay the boarding total neither, right? At a certain point, it's about getting the animal back. But I certainly understand your point, and will certainly understand if council wishes to change that timeline.
Well, Sean, if I may, Mayor Todd, now that I've seen the acknowledged word in there, I don't have any problem with the 5 days at all. I think that's lots of time. But I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the animal. If you can't find anybody to acknowledge ownership, at what point do you say, okay, that dog can be adopted, or that cat can be adopted? And as you mentioned, we're paying a daily fee for looking after the animal, so it's a cost type of thing as well.
Yeah, Sean, a final comment on that one. It's a good,
Yeah.
point. We've obviously got a little ways to go tonight, so.
Not a problem. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's the same thing. We will do everything we can. I don't see any pet being sent to an adoption service within a week or even 2 weeks. At that point, it'll certainly probably go. And like everything else, wherever we're having it adopted through, there's lots of people that understand if someone came up and said later that, like it's like everything else. You show up 3 years later, it might be tough to claim back your dog, but you show up a couple weeks later, most people are going to work with you to make sure that the animal gets back where it belongs. And it's about finding balance. And I'd like to think that this bylaw has found that balance.
Thanks very much, Sean. Any other points?
Yeah, the last one I have, Brett, is halfway down page 2711. It's designated public off-leash dog park. This is assuming at some point in time we actually build a dog park, which I think we're getting closer. Any dog may run at large without a leash within a designated public off-leash dog park. There are, just a second here, 5A, there. Yeah, dogs that have been designated as dangerous, in other words, dogs that have to have a muzzle put on them. Personally, I don't think those types of dogs have any place in a dog park. Usually they're very aggressive, and you put a couple of beagles or something in there running around and you have a larger dog, even if it's on a muzzle, I don't believe it has any business being in a dog park. That's my final one.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor McConnell. Good point on that one. Do we need language into Matt? I know it is noted elsewhere what the for muzzle and so forth, but comment?
I'm wondering if in Schedule B we would add another provision in there, perhaps a P, that any dog that has been identified as being aggressive or is under a muzzle order is not allowed to be at the dog park. Something to that effect.
Sure makes
I'm
sense.
happy with that.
Councillor McConnell, you like that as a suggestion to add that?
I'm happy with that. Yes, thank you.
Everyone okay with adding that to P? And when we do bring this back forward at the end of this, we'll just, we may have to change some of the wording, and I would ask for a friendly amendment on a couple of small changes here if we're going to go down this road and pass this evening. Comments, questions from other members of council tonight? Councillor Young, please.
I was curious about wild animals and exotic animals. Is that sufficient within an animal control bylaw, or do you have to list them as lions and tigers and raccoons or whatever?
Oh, my.
Under 7, it is pretty wide open. So Sean, do you have a comment on that? Do we need any kind of designated schedule there for someone as a boa constrictor or?
Of all the places that I looked at in Eastern Ontario and Ontario, most of them went with the definition we had. I could only find one case where they actually tried to list them all. My problem would be trying to list them all, because Lord knows there'll be someone that finds something in South America or Asia or somewhere else. It seems like a good idea at the time when they brought it home, and it's just not a good idea. I think holding the line on exotic animals or wildlife is a wise choice for the town.
Good, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Young. Mr. Merriman, other comments, questions this evening? Councillor Jansman, and then Councillor Ostrander.
I want to support this bylaw. I believe it should include the addition of cats. It is about responsible ownership of pets. So for all of that I do want to support this. Our current bylaw, I just feel like it's a big, big leap from our current bylaw that now reads that leashes aren't even mandatory for dogs, to going to this proposed bylaw of leashes are now mandatory for dogs and cats. So when I boil it all down, it's the wording of 5C that I just can't seem to come around to accepting. And I too have been discussing this a lot in the last 2 weeks. And I think the best example I can give to me not supporting 5C is a resident called me. She lives across from the high school. She has 2 adult outdoor cats who are neutered. And I make a point of saying that they're neutered because in case, because it makes a big difference. Cats who are neutered, who are fixed, aren't the ones who spray lawn furniture or front doorsteps or meow outside the windows, right? She is a responsible cat owner, but she buys the breakaway collars so the cats don't harm themselves and the whole thing. But unless you, and a vet would say this too, unless you start putting a leash on a kitten, you can't put a leash on a cat. So she sincerely asked me, she said, so am I now supposed to decide on moving out of town or keeping my cats? So I don't think anybody around this table wants to have that put on residents. So it's the leash on a cat. That's not to say I don't support the nuisance thing, that we all have to be responsible pet owners, but to treat dogs and cats the same in such a short period of time with no grandfather clause, with no education of if you're going to get a cat, start young and put a leash on them, because that's what our bylaw says. It's just too fast, too quickly. And a person actually contacted me. So the flip side to that was trying to change my mind about this and said, why can't it be an animal control bylaw and treat dogs and cats the same? And I said, because an unleashed cat is not the same, does not create the possible same fear as an unleashed dog. You can't treat cats and dogs the same. And a prime example of that, if you will, is our dog park. It's called a dog park. Why isn't it called an animal park if we really want to treat dogs and cats the same? So I hear the staff saying, I hear Mayor Todd saying, it's really not going to change anything, but the bylaw reads as it reads. So if you get a resident who adheres to bylaws, they can't be at the mercy of, well, nothing's really going to change, because that defeats the whole purpose of having a bylaw. So that's where I'm at, and that's where I'm struggling. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jansman. I was going to raise, as we get towards the end of this discussion, the implementation. And that's obviously something that we haven't really discussed here. And I know Mr. Armstrong did send a quick note out to us all at the end of last week with regards to how we implement this if we go forward with it this evening. So that was something I was going to put out there for we get towards the end of the discussion, and we could discuss implementation, and we could add implementation to the final wording of the motion tonight. So obviously that would allow for the possibility of education, that would add in for the phasing and the education process of this. I will note that other municipalities have done something very similar when they've brought this in. I know I was referred to the City of Calgary's bylaw with regard to this, and I know other municipalities have done something similar when they brought this forward. And it's my own comment on the leash at all times. and, you know, again, I understand, because I've heard from residents in the same way with this, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can say, well, my cat's, you know, neutered, my cat's not a nuisance, everyone in the neighborhood may like him, whatever else. But, you know, at the end of it, the nuisance provisions are still there. So if there is a neighbor that complains about it, even under the current bylaw, you know, bylaw can act. So that's where I get down to the fact that I don't see any huge change. It just really just talks about pets in a more universal concern, because the idea is responsible pet ownership. And, you know, your rights with regards to that responsible pet ownership stops when it interferes with neighbors' enjoyment of their property and so forth. And, you know, we all, and no responsible pet owner wants their dog or cat to have an issue with regards to the neighbors. And that's really what we're trying to encourage here. So I see your point. I'm wondering if it can be addressed in terms of implementation and how we move forward. I know Mr. Armstrong had a suggestion there last week, and it is something I think we should probably address before we pass this evening and possibly modify the motion. Matt, did you want to mention that briefly then? So Councillor Jansman has noted this. So, you know, what you were sort of proposing last week as a topic for discussion in terms of implementation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So when we take a look at implementing this particular bylaw, I think it's incumbent upon the town to first educate the public in terms of what the changes are and the effects of those changes. But we would recommend, I think, that we wouldn't go hard and fast, that we would say the rest of 2021 would be spent educating to making sure people understand what their responsibilities are under the bylaw, and being able to prepare for you know, that tag implementation in 2022 as of January 1st. So given that the provision of the bylaw says that each January you shall obtain a tag, then given that we're past that time, that the next time that would present itself is in January of 2022. So certainly I think for those that now become applicable under the tagging, which would be for cats, nothing really changes for dogs from that perspective. We would spend that time doing that. Certainly from the leash perspective, we've spent a lot of time in the course of 2020 handing out warnings to people walking through parks that they need to have their dogs leashed, things like that. We would continue to do so, and multiple offenders would then start to be fined under this bylaw. So I think we've taken the last year to identify that leashes are an important part of dog ownership when not on the owner's property, and that responsibility. So and we'll continue doing that, and certainly being able to explain why getting animals back to their owners when they become lost or have wandered off, then that's really the intention of what we're trying to achieve here. So I think those two things, as well as the benefits of having cats in a more controlled area and being able to make sure that not passing on disease and things like that, and it is important as well from a public education perspective. So all of those things are kind of what we would do as a rollout for this, and being able to move it forward. In terms of just one thing that I did want to bring up is that we need to change one word under guide dog to note its disability as opposed to handicap, and that just needs more of a clerical type of area correction as opposed to changing the definition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Councillor Jansman, any follow-up or response to that discussion?
No, just another question too, because it was, I was contacted and I saw this on social media as well. The whole, you know, until our dog park, not animal park, gets official, our unofficial or informal dog park currently is private property. So again, I think I might hear, well, that won't come into play. So I'm trusting that will be the case, but it does still concern me that the bylaw is not going to be put into practice yet, but the bylaw reads how it reads. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Mr. Merriman, I see you've got your finger up there, so please.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the nice thing about the unofficial dog park, Councillor Jasmine, is because it's on private property, anyone that owns private property is not mandated to make dogs wear a leash. So providing the owner of the private property does not have a concern with it, the town won't have a concern with it at this point.
And I know this was something that both Lee and I brought up at the last discussion about, I mentioned, a gentleman I see down at the Heritage Trail many times a week playing with his dog off leash in the middle of a wide open area down there. And I just, want to mention to people that this is not, the bylaw is not intended to go after people exercising their dogs or cats in a responsible fashion outdoors like that. Not what we're about here at all. And we did make that very clear in the last meeting, I thought, and that was sort of miscommunicated, I think, a little bit in the Recorder and Times article, which was accurate to the letter of the law, but definitely not the spirit of how we would be looking at enforcing it. Situations like that are all about, clear nuisance issues where you have a dog approaching someone else, a dog possibly biting someone else, someone else's animal when on a walk. And we've had those concerns before down in the walkways in Prescott. So it's about responsible pet ownership. Again, at the end of the day, I hate to sound like a broken record on that, but that's really what the bylaw is really all about. And I think most people in town, the vast majority are on the same page with us on that. Anything further for a follow-up, Councillor Jasmine, before I move on? I have Councillor Ostrander and then Councillor Young.
No, thank you though.
Thank you. Mike, you're up, and then on to Ray, please.
I'll be very brief. In the past 6 years, when the subject of a Prescott owned or operated dog run has come up, I've been in favor of it. I still am, and I think it's has to be looked at somewhere down the road to put this all in context of new bylaw and maybe a little more stringent rules. But let's let the good people who are doing and obeying the laws, let's let them have their space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ostrander. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Brett. Sean, you're going to order new tags, a separate tag for cats.
John?
The nice thing is last year when we switched, we went to a very, 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 very tiny tag that'll work on both dogs or cats.
Okay, I was just going to suggest that if people wanted to buy their cat a tag now, it would be good until the end of 2022. So they'd get more than, if we're not going to ask them to buy it until the beginning of 22, they want to buy it early.
Yep, I'd be fine with that, sir.
Sure. Just if it does get lost, they've got a tag and a better chance of getting it back.
Thanks very much. Ray, we've pretty much gone around the table on this. Lee, did you have another quick comment?
Well, not a comment so much, Brett, as a question. And I'm not sure anybody can answer this or not, but these chips, I've never had a dog chipped, or I've never had a cat because I'm allergic. So obviously I haven't had a cat chipped, but that's done at the vets, and I take it. And how is that done, and what is the cost? Does anybody know?
I think it's $70 for a cat right now, as I know someone that was just looking at the process with a cat they just adopted. But I don't quote me on that, but I think that's the fee. Sean, do you have any further information on that?
Yeah, because it's done by a veterinarian, it's kind of like hiring a building contractor. The prices can go up and down depending on where you're going. But there's a lot of places that do it, including the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty of Animals and stuff like that do it basically at cost. In general, the lowest I've ever seen it is about $50, but I have seen people charged up to $150 if they decide to do it. The biggest problem when you're using it, in all honesty, is making sure that you keep the database updated as to your new living. I've seen many times where people scan it, and the people haven't lived there in 5 or 10 or 15 years sometimes. In fact, I got notified the other day about an animal that I had went with my ex-wife back to Chatham quite a while ago. So I was kind enough to let her know, though.
But how is it done?
Just insert it underneath the skin, kind of like you'd see in a science fiction movie.
Back of the neck.
What I'm wondering is, we have rabies clinics usually once a year at the town barn or someplace where you can take your dog out and for a reduced fee get a rabies shot, or a cat or whatever. I wonder if it'd be worthwhile looking into, since we're going to get one of these readers, having the SPCA or somebody come in at a lower cost and do animals at the same time. It would certainly be a benefit locally.
Sure, we could look into that with regards to the implementation if we go forward there this evening. So that could be part of the implementation process to discuss that as we educate people and try to maybe encourage more adoption of the chips. Although I do note that a lot of rescue organizations and virtually all breeders do put the chips in the animals before you take them home as well, both cats and dogs. It's become such a common thing. That's why one of the reasons the cost has come down in recent years. It's very commonly adopted now. Okay, so we've all really discussed this heavily. I'd like to bring this back and try to close it off tonight. We do have the motion out there, and despite the fact I've taken a lot of notes, I've lost track of who moved and who seconded here. Was it Gory? Did you? So it was moved by Councillor Shankar, and did I have Councillor Ostrander seconding? Was that the?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the suggestions we talked about for changes to put into an amendment, and I'll just try to go over this just for the benefit of our clerk, Ms. Veldkamp. I always hate to throw this at you, Lindsay, but I think we have to make a couple changes here. So the amendments would be the changing of that guide dog provision where it's mentioned handicap, changing the wording to disabled. Was that correct on that one, Matthew? And adding section P to the schedule on the dog park to deal with not allowing any dog deemed aggressive or leash under muzzle provisions not allowed in the dog park. So we can add that as P under that schedule. And then the latter part of it would be phasing in this animal control bylaw then over the calendar year 2021 for the provisions to come into full effect in 2022. So that way we use the remainder of this year for education and to get it out there what we're doing here, and to work with everyone in town to make sure that we allow for the proper adoption of the changes to the bylaw. So I could ask for a friendly, if that's an approval of Councillor Shankar and the seconder, Councillor Ostrander, we could add those items as a friendly amendment.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so I see approval by Councillor Shankar and Councillor Ostrander. So we'll put that motion out there I think we discussed this pretty thoroughly. So I think we can probably just safely put this to the vote right now. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. Motion is carried. And again, just so people are aware out there, this is going to be phased in over the course of 2021. The whole point of this bylaw is to encourage more responsible pet ownership in town and to work with the vast majority of pet owners in Prescott who are responsible owners of their cats and dogs. So please, any comments, questions on the implementation of this, please contact us. And our bylaw office will do the best job possible, as always, to educate and inform people about what's happening here. So thanks, everyone, for the good debate this evening. And with that, we'll move on. So that actually does take us through the formal portion, open session this evening. So moving on, we've got item 15, new business. Any member of council have any new business they'd like to raise this evening? Seeing no. 16, notices of motion. Any member of council have a notice of motion to present tonight? Seeing no. 17 under mayor's proclamations, nothing this evening. So that does take us to 18 in the closed session. I will note that we'll take a 5-minute break before we move into closed, just to give everyone, we're over 2 hours now, so give everyone a quick chance to stretch their legs. So under 18 closed session, we do have the recommendation tonight that council move into closed session at, we'll say 8:20. Actually, we'll say 8:22. To address matters pertaining to 18.1 purchase and sale. That's under section 239(2)(c) of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and 18.2 identifiable individual. That's also under section 239(2)(b) of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and 18.3 approval of closed session minutes, which were distributed to everyone last week. And also, of course, that the CAO treasurer, clerk, deputy clerk, and economic development officer remain in the room for item 18.1, and that the CAO treasurer, clerk, and deputy clerk remain in the room for items 18.2 and 18.3. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconded by almost everyone, but I'll take Councillor Young. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. We will move into the closed session. We'll take a quick break to about 8:22, give everyone a chance to stretch the legs. So we'll be back very shortly.